I think you're 1176, but it's lovely to see you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So this is Susie Diaz, who is one of our grads. He's just an awesome human being, and also is one of the hygiene. What's your title now? Are you one of the coordinators?
Okay.
Right?
Oh yeah, this one.
Okay. For Western.
Yes.
Right. So
Sorry, wrong class. I thought she told me 11 and 1. I apologize.
that's okay. I think she's 1176.
Good kid.
So next year when you're graduating, you're talking to Susie.
Yeah, one more year, guys.
All right. So we've gotten through pretty much all the instruments, right? You're like, oh look, we now kind of how to use everything. Pretty exciting. And now it's putting them all together. So read this later. Group quiz takes a lot of time. Okay, so the deal is you just spent a couple hours scaling, right? Because juniors, even in seniors, you'll spend a couple hours scaling the quad. Feeling really good about it. Instructor comes over, feels everything, and you just have tons of burning calculus everywhere. So how could this be? So if you're using anything that is dull, right? The dull knife is the really scary knife because you'll slip around. If you're using the green, the slimline deplaquing ultrasonic tips. If you're using the correct ultrasonic tip, the blue one or the purple one, but it's on low power. If you're using stuff with flexible shanks, like your little minis, or you're using incorrect technique, you're not going to be successful getting everything off.
So the go-to should always be blue, like whenever we use our
So if there's somebody that just has biofilm, what do you think?
green.
On what power?
The green section, the blue zone.
That blue zone, right? So you're just going to think always individually what's appropriate for this patient in this place. And that's going to change around the mouth. Okay? So, Wilkins has this woodworking analogy, right? Don't use the band, use the bandsaw where you need to and use the little tiny things. So, here's the deal. If you're felling the tree, you're going to use the chainsaw. If you got to cut into boards, you're going to use the table saw. Hand saw for things that are smaller. Oh, let's get this smoother. I've got a little tiny spot I want to instrument. Oh, even smaller detail. All right, and then coming in here with even little mini hand instruments. Okay, so what's this?
Let's do this one.
What instrument do you have that's like that?
No.
The minis, right? So, let's talk about some review. So, nothing works. It's not sharp. Two men cut wood all day long, one worked straight through without stopping to rest. At the end of the day, he had a sizable pile of logs. The other would chop for 50 minutes, then take a 10-minute break. At the end of the day, he had a much larger pile. How could you chop more, asked the man who worked continuously. Anytime he stopped to rest, he sharpened the axe. You should just always, always, always have really, really sharp instruments. You will have to sharpen during appointments if you have a heavy patient. You're just going to have to. So remember that you're going to be sharpening evenly from the heel to the side of the toe. Remember the tip is going to be a little different. You're going to have that nice different angulation. And how sharp do you have to have them? Razor sharp. Can't hear it, can you? Yes, I put a laser down in there. As you know, nerd. Okay. Modified pen grasp. Remember we talked about this being a chuck grasp. This is the chuck of a drill. You're doing those 3 fingers in a triangle to be really stable. You're cocking back your index finger 90 degrees. Your thumb's almost straight across, slightly closer to the end. That distance between this is where your fulcrum power is to here is going to be your lateral stability and your leverage. So if your hand is not starting to look more and more like that, seek somebody out today, because tomorrow assessment is coming. Okay. Remember that we've got to stand up on your fulcrum really, really well. Let's get a little better view of these. Okay. Standing up really carefully, good technique, so that your terminal shank is not coming across, it's straight up and down. You'll be able to feel things better. You're going to make sure with Universal Sickles files that you're leaned in a little bit. With your Gracies, you're going to stand straight up, parallel to that tooth surface because it's already correctly angulated. So,
What's calculus?
you also want to make sure that you have this 70 to 80 degree angle between the face of the blade and the tooth surface,
Calculus.
but also this little space between the heel and the tooth. Right, got to roll up on the side of the toe,
See what it
and
says,
that
60
is
to
your
80.
visual cue when you're going subgingival that you're in
Angulation.
fact up on the side of the toe.
For
You're seeing that
calculus.
heel kicked away from the tooth a little bit.
You see it?
Remember channel scaling, I think I've said that ad nauseum tonight, so we're good on that. Overlapping strokes, getting at least across the 51%, really more like 75% most places. Got to reach across and overlap underneath the contact. Okay, and we're going to think about assessment strokes. Light lateral pressure, or slightly longer strokes, overlapping. Biofilm debridement. This would be assessment with probes, explorers, and your curettes as well. Biofilm, light lateral pressure, more medium length, overlapping multiple directions. You're assessing all the time because if you run across someplace that has calculus, then we're going to scale, right? But we're only going to scale calculus removal in areas that need it. Don't just go, right? When you start out, you have no gas pedal control, right? Learning to drive the road. Okay, same idea. We got the gas pedal thing. Only as much gas as you need. Root planing, again, back to the light to moderate lateral pressure, overlapping multiple directions. Has anybody had a patient that had burnish calculus yet? I think we're gonna have a lot of seniors. Oh, maybe not, it's that, okay. So, if you have burnish calculus, or to find burnish calculus, this is the one exception on exploring. That you're going to have to use light to moderate lateral pressure and roll up on the side of your toe, have that heel of the 11-12 sticking out a little further to be able to feel the burnish calculus, because what you're looking for there is not necessarily roughness, because you made it nice and smooth, or the previous hygienist made it nice and smooth. Now you're looking for dimension. So you'll actually be able to feel the speed bumpiness of it versus very gritty feel. Does that make sense? You'll use your radiograph to see, oh, this weird bump on this tooth. Is that the tooth or is it not? Okay, so here's the thing. Normal sulcus. Those of you with normal sulci, what instruments do you want to be used on you? Something sharpened down and skinny, hopefully, right? Because you like your gum tissue where it is, and we would like to keep the junctional epithelium where it is. How about this patient? They've scrubbed the dickens out of this. How deep is that pocket?
6.
Have you had somebody with the 0.5 millimeter pocket that you can't even get the probe tip really in because they're just scrubbing on there? There's like 3 microns in there and that's it. Right? So, gotta be really, really gentle to these guys. We want to do plaque debridement. If they don't have tons and tons of plaque, it's not going to take you that long, right? Yes, we want to touch every surface, but we're going to use something that is skinny, light pressure, very controlled. Moderate to heavy supra, right? Now what do you want? What are you itching to grab?
Sickles.
Sickles, right? Something heavier, moderate subgingival calculus. Curette, ultrasonic, which tip of the ultrasonic? Blue tip, right? Some moderate power, at least 12 o'clock. And it's really exciting because that just kind of melts away. It's very cool. Heavy supra. Dear God. First, get the camera, right? We have to document this. It's not okay to Facebook your patients, just mouths, okay? Can't do that. But this really heavy, tenacious, old stuff. I can tell it's old because it's black.
Can you just like use your hand or something to get that?
This guy, it's calcified enough. You're probably going to have to attack it from this side and just break it off in a big hunk of chunk. It's way too big for cotton pliers. Right, so yes, somebody's going to catch the boulder when it comes off. Don't let the patient inhale it. That's our one big criteria. Okay, so in the person's mouth, see how from here to here we changed what we needed. Right? So this is a site by site by site evaluation as you're going through. So here's the deal. Right now y'all scale by time, right? If I just spend 5 minutes on every surface, it'll be good, right? This is not a 5-minute surface. If you scale that for 5 minutes, shame on you. Ow. If you scale this for 5 minutes, per tooth, probably pretty much okay. If you try to scale that in 5 minutes, it is not going to happen. Right? So, you're going to be thoughtful. You're not going to scale by time. You're going to scale by what does this spot in the patient's mouth need. What instrument, what force, how long. Okay, so same idea. Look ahead with your radiographs. How hard are you going to have to work with this patient? Not hard, right? Nice bone level, just a little biologic width, no attachment loss, no deposits. How about these nice rings here? That's going to take you some, right? Then there's these guys, and my favorite, this right here. Whee! You can trip it with your toe over those guys. Okay, so if I send you back to one of these pieces, and you come back in 5 minutes, you're like, I'm done. I'm thinking, no. No, and I have to teach you to explore again. Right? So, you're going to be thoughtful about all these guys. So, here's our basic order of instrumentation. Ultrasonics. Specifically, bevel tips on high power, so that's your blue tip. Or round tips on high power. They sell a black tip, Cavitron does, that has a round tip, which you use on high power. Sickles, why?
They're strong.
They're strong, rigid shanks, right? Heavy duty. Periodontal files, the Orban, which, by the way, I figured out your files are actually Orban files. So, you can use them on some medium stuff, I did talk about that. But still, they are smaller versions of the Orban, so don't go crazy and think you're taking out big hunka-chunkas. Universal curettes. Why are universal curettes after sickles? You can go subgingival, what else? How springy are your universal curettes?
Not, they're straight.
Kind of springy. Okay. Area-specific curettes. Now we have rigid, so that helps kind of puts them somewhat equal to our universal curettes, in my opinion. The thin cert ultrasonic tip, that's the purple one, medium to high power is needed carefully. Mini curettes, finishing files, the Hirschfeld ones that you don't have, but you're somewhere between the Orban and Hirschfeld. The slimline ultrasonic tips, that's your green tip, micro or other special finishing instruments. So the micro mini 5 extended, the diamond files, the Catan, the O'Hara files that we talked about last time. All right, rigid shanks for heavy deposits, standard shanks for lighter.
For the question you gave in the quiz, are we gonna go from ultrasound to universal, correct? Or
So I would go ultrasonics to sickles.
at 7 millimeters?
Oh, not at 7 millimeters.
So in that case, if it's 7 millimeter, you did your ultrasound and you use the blue one. Do you go to universal current or area specific if you said it's smaller?
I would say I would use my 1011 universal because it is pretty heavy. And I keep my 1314 Columbia for shallower pockets because it's shorter blade and shorter shank. And then, especially after you use it on the kids, it's a little sharper down. That's great for shallower pockets.
Would you do the file before that?
I would not do the files necessarily before that because the Orban files you have are a little bit skinnier. Okay, so this is what we're going to use on the really hard ones, but we're going to start down here with the easy cases, just doing the 1314. Maybe just exploring a lot of the areas and doing deplaquing, and then only making sure that you scale only the calculus. So, just like we talked about with cooking, yes?
Going back to that last slide, as I was reviewing this, it kind of confused me, your arrow. It made sense that it goes from like heaviest.
Yeah, more power.
But do you want us to start down?
Start up here.
Okay, so don't start with, yeah, okay, no, just making sure.
I'll need to put a little power
Because the
over there.
arrow-
Gotcha. Sorry.
That's okay, I figured it out, because I would get burned if I started down there, but I just wanted to.
Okay, so like we talked about with cooking, right? You don't want to be in there chopping the squash for an hour. Right? So, the patient's going to spend less time in the chair because you're not pussyfooting around with something on low power or some little tiny instrument. You know, I'm worried about hurting her. No, let's just get her done with good control. They're going to have less pain during and after the procedure. Remember how we talked about you could pretty much obliterate the blueberry with a big old knife, right? Better healing and a feeling of safety and security. So if you have the hygienist that you're the Granny Smith apple and they have the dull instrument, you know, the plastic knife, and they're sliding all, yeah, it's just not pretty. For you, less time scaling, you have got to stay on time. I know you're all freaked out about having clinic back-to-back, right? But you did sign up for this, that you'll have 8 to 10 patients a day, back-to-back, all day long, right? So you gotta stay on schedule, and oh my gosh, you have to be able to do that without being completely fatigued and having cumulative trauma to your body. You have better outcomes, so you have better patient relationship, and guess what? If your patients love you, who else loves you?
The family.
The family. And the boss, right? If you're that person, they're like, oh my gosh, that hygienist does an awesome job cleaning my teeth. It's not that uncomfortable, they're on time, it's beautiful. So, let's talk about ultrasonics. So more power. These are the beaver tail guys. It's a big, wide, flat thing that looks kind of like a beaver's tail. That's why it's called beaver tail. Beveled. This is your blue tip. Round, there's that black round one. The thin cert, there's your purple guy. Slimline is your deplaquing. The diamond coated would be only for perioscopy. Yes?
So just like as a safe kind of rule of thumb, if they're like a perio maintenance, we always just stick with blue.
It depends.
No.
They may have really, really shallow pockets that you can just deplaque. So if you have the patient that had some 4 millimeter pockets, they had 1 or 2 millimeters of cal, and now their pockets are 2s and 3s, and they have hardly any biofilm, and they don't bleed, then you could just be doing deplaquing.
The slide line?
Which is the slim line, yeah. Slime line. I like that. Okay, so deplaquing, right? Light calculus, moderate to heavy. This could be moderate. And then think about what power setting you're going to be on, right? So the deplaquing, low power, heavy stuff, turn that guy up. What happens with the slim line tip on moderate to heavy calculus? Right? Wait for your time. So, hand instruments. I think you know that. I hope you know that. Here's the deal. Flexible. Your shank is going to yield as you encounter rough deposits. It's going to bounce over those surfaces. You're going to find light pieces of calculus. You're going to be able to remove only light pieces of calculus. So explorers, those standard area-specific curettes, your mini expandeds, and other finishing instruments. Moderately flexible would be your standard universal curettes, not rigid, standard, and standard area specifics. So medium or light. Rigid. These are why we give you rigid Gracies. And why your 1011 is not the slim, it's the regular size blade. We want you to be able to get in there and really transmit the force of your lateral pressure to the tooth, to the deposits, be able to get the deposits off. So, excellent tactile sensitivity, flexible, right, that's our explorers. Limited tactile sensitivity with the rigids. It gets better over time. But you need to make sure that you are not over-instrumenting or under-instrumenting by checking with other things. So, again, rigid, flexible. We're not going to try to go in with our Columbia 1314, take big hunk of chunkas off. It's not going to work well. So, the larger the piece of calculus, the more rigid the shank, the smaller, the more flexible. What's the most flexible thing we got? Explorer, right? Because we've got to get the transmission of vibration from the tip to your hand. So that is going to be the most feedback that you get from the instrument. Can you take off calculus with that guy? Don't waste your time or injure the patient because it'll pop off and poke them in the gums and it won't be nice. Okay, so anything that's scalars, we have very, very little flexibility. So sickles, hoes, chisels, periodontal files. You can use them on a small piece of calculus with care, right? So obviously your files you could use them on a smaller piece of calculus. And it would be more than that you're using them for access into the pocket more than anything. Medium piece of calculus is usually more appropriate, and then large, you definitely have to use the rigid shank and the heavier blades. So, finishing instruments. A standard universal curette or an area-specific curette is moderately flexible. And so, yes, you can get small pieces of calculus off, but you are not going to be able to get big pieces off, and you might struggle even sometimes to get moderate pieces. So you have to use them with care. So if you go into an office and all they have is standard shank Gracies, you're going ka-spring over pieces. You and the boss are going to have a top. Okay, so sickles, files, hoes, chisels, we talked about that. The sickles, obviously big, heavy, rigid shanks, straight for anterior, contraangled for posterior, single end repaired. We're doing the Nevi for tomorrow, so you're going to not remove your partner's papilla. You're going to be cautious with that guy. But great for getting the bigger pieces off. Fracturing off large supragingival pieces. How about if the tissue is really, really retractable?
You could use it, yes.
You can go some, if that tissue is kind of floppy or retractable because it's inflamed. So, slightly subgingivally for gross scaling. So, the subgingival calculus, started as supra and worked its way down. So, if you have that big old piece that is start supra, go sub, typically you can work on a corner of it and work around it, and you'll have tissue that is distended because of the calculus underneath it. You'll be able to get somewhat sub with it. You do have to be really careful to adapt around the line angles and into depressions so that you're not chopping up the tooth with the tip, right? Being kind to the surface of the tooth. You will sometimes find these little mini sickles for under contacts. Those you use just under the contact and just supra. You cannot really get this guy sub. Files, remember we talked about double-ended, paired. You're going to use them to roughen things up. That's typically what we're using them for, is roughening up burnished calculus, the ones that you guys have. But again, you're going to be able to use them in deep, narrow spots that are very difficult to access with any other instrument. And we're going to be somewhere between the Orban and the Hirschfeld. You do have fairly rigid shanks on those guys, so you can do a little more work with them than these more finishing files. Remember the hose, we use these historically, not so much now, but the Catan files and the O'Hare frication curettes, you can get in there. And again, we're looking mostly gross debridement and not being able to get sub very well. Same thing with our chisels. This is more like those little O'Hare guys that you're going to be able to do a push stroke with. So limited application in certain areas. The aluminum guys are good in the frication. Okay, curettes. So universal curettes, they all look pretty similar. What tells you it's a universal curette versus an area-specific curette?
Double working.
Two cutting edges per working end, right? How can you tell it's two cutting edges?
Put it under light.
You'll find out.
Area-specific has a lower, longer, outer cutting edge. I would not recommend just finding it out by deciding whether it is gingival trauma. Okay, so you're going to have that pre-angulated area for the area-specific. So, supragingival calculus, sure. Standard instrument for subgingival root planing. Remember, rounded tip, rounded back. But you're going to gross debride first. Lots of times when people get the Gracies in the video, they're like, oh my gosh, why have we been wasting our time with all that other stuff? That's done. I'm just using these, right? Don't forget, you mostly have to get the big stuff off with other things. These are still considered finishing instruments. So fine scaling, root planing, light deposits or light to moderate deposits. They tend to be more slender, more flexible shank. Pull stroke, vertical, horizontal, oblique. But we're not going to recommend these guys. Even the rigid shanks of your Gracies are not enough to get gross debridement going on, moderate to heavy sub, burnished deposits. It's not going to happen. You've got to break things up. The flexible shank, if you have flexible shank versus the rigid shank, it's just going to bounce over things. So when I was in school, they gave us one set of regular shanks and two sets of the rigids, and we were like, why did you make us spend the money on the regular ones? So frustrating. So we just use them for really light patients. It's going to feel weird. You'll actually feel it kind of bouncing over. So like I say, then you're going to talk to your boss about what you really want. Rigid shanks, rigids. Okay, universals. Different shank and blade designs. You guys are already able to analyze which are anterior and posterior instruments, right? Because, oh my gosh, you're awesome. So, because they're a little more flexible, you do get some better tactile sensitivity. So when you're doing the scaling stroke and then you slide back into the pocket, you're always doing what when you go back in? Exploring. You get more feedback. So that is the nice thing is as you're working through the case, if the patient doesn't have a whole lot of calculus, you're getting pretty good feedback. You're always going to finish checking with your explorers. But it is a little bit quicker to be able to go through somebody's mouth when they don't have a whole lot of deposits because you get that additional feedback. You can buy rigid universals. They tend to have a thicker blade and a thicker shank. And so sometimes those are helpful. So for me, that would be the 1011, that I like that to be thicker, more rigid. And I like to be able to use that on my heavier rib planing cases, and then as it gets sharpened down, it's really nice to use more on the prophy patients because it still is not real bouncy. So this is our standard flexible. Here's your rigids, and then remember we have the extra rigids. The rigids and the extra rigids are definitely less likely to burnish calculus so long as you're using them correctly. Even a really great clinician, if they're using these flexible shanks, are more likely to burnish calculus because they just don't have the power to be able to really get those surfaces super clean. However, if you start out thinking, I love these rigid Gracies, that's all I'm using, you will knock the tops off of the calculus, the the less calcified areas, and you wind up with a super duper smooth burnished area That really, really calcified stuff that's really locked into the root surfaces. That's been there the longest. All right, and then the mini blades, the extended shanks. Your micro mini Gracies, Catan furcation curettes, O'Hare files. Sorry, I had those mixed up. Catan furcation curettes, O'Hare files. And your diamond files if you were using periodontal endoscope. These guys were doing line angles, concavities, furcations. They tend to be more flexible, have more sensitivity because these guys, you're trying to get tiny little pieces you couldn't access with something else. So, the bigger the deposit, the more rigid the shank. You're going to start with some gross debridement, get the heavy deposits off, crushing, fracturing, roughening the deposits. This stuff, you're going to have reduced tactile sensitivity. So you're going to be good technique, cautious, but get all those big hunks off of there first. There's no point in wasting your time, trying to scrub the whole barracks with the toothbrush. You just got to get in there and get the big guns for the big pieces. And then deplaquing or scaling, especially pediatric patients, you're going to use smaller, more flexible, thinner instruments. They're going to be for light to moderate deposit removal only. You might use them for smoothing or root planing. It's going to give you increased tactile sensitivity. So you get better feedback of what you're doing as you're finishing this case. So first thing is you're going to be your ultrasonics and your sickles. You can go to your rigid curettes and then your thin cert, and then standard curettes, area specifics, slimlines is going to be your second. Or, series of steps. That's going to be second in your SRP cases for sure. Okay, so anything that's dull, what are we doing here? Wasting your time, wasting the patient's time. Sharpen, sharpen, sharpen. Right? My little, whatever's goofy, right? This sharp, this sharp. Bevel or standard ultrasonic insert on low power, right? Slimline, the lightweight ultrasonic, any of your flexible shanks, or any incorrect technique. So if you have poor grasp, fulcrum strength, poor lateral pressure, you're not standing up in your fulcrum, you're not using that last couple of millimeters of the blade, you're not directing your handle toward the opposite arch to be able to get interproximal, you're not pivoting on your fulcrum to reach across surfaces, any of that is going to lead you to miss areas. So, here's our order of instrumentation. We talked about this woodworking analogy. This is the deal. Right? So your beveled ultrasonic instruments. The beaver tail, you really can only use Supra, but oh my gosh, that would be what you would use for that giant boulder that was hanging off the side of the tooth. We were all, take the picture first. But think about your standard ultrasonics. You need something with power. Your sickle's a nice, powerful hand tool. Your thin cert is going to be a little bit less powerful in some areas. Universal curettes, files, Gracies, more details. Slimline ultrasonic, just getting the little surface problems off of there. And then all these little tiny mini bladed things would be little tiny detail. So don't start with the little tiny stuff if you need the big stuff. Again, less chair time, less pain during and after the procedure, better healing, and that feeling of safety and security. For you, less time skilling, less fatigue, less cumulative trauma disorders. You got to stay on that schedule. Cannot be wasting time doing crazy little tiny things. Better outcomes, patients are really going to like you a whole lot better. So, smarter, not harder. That's the big thing. Okay. Questions on any of that stuff?
All good?
Time for a nap.
You're
Yes. Oh, thank you. Okay, so you got a little break because Barb was not here. To take your deposit checks, is anybody besides Sarah and Tricia going to HOD? House delegates, student house representatives? You got to decide today. And tell Barbara. So I'd love to send several of you if we can. It is after finals. So beginning of vacation, but it's after finals.
It's $100 check down.
Oh, how much is it?
$100 deposit check
Today.
today,
If
tomorrow morning.
go this way,
So, depends on, we can sign people up, let me think. We do need to let them know that you're coming. You can come just for a single day as an observer, and it does not cost anything.
Does that still count as a,
Still counts as an event point.
if you just come for one day?
Uh-huh,
Sign me up.
okay?
where is it at?
It's in Irvine. It's a few blocks from Disneyland. Is that changing the decision?
Ooh, Disneyland.
The party on Saturday night is 90s neon dance party theme.
Let's go dancing, bro.
That's included in registration.
Celebrate.
I'm going to the
Sorry, that's 80s because.
Oh, that's 80s.
81.
Oh, okay.
That was kind of our theme song. Thank God we're done paying tuition here and we're gonna go make money. Okay, so if you have questions, come talk to me and Tricia, and otherwise, see, take a nap, have some food, see you at 1. You're welcome. That group quiz is 30 points.
So since you're going to Puerto Vallarta, you can do the event points. Just go for one day.
no, because I'm going to
But
Puerto
your
Vallarta.
percentage looked
But
good
it's
on that,
before. I
yes.
think that event is before. Because that.
So that's all about the
After,
percentage.
just after finals. And it's not, the event is after finals or before?
The House of Delegates is the weekend after finals. You're done with
Weekend
finals
after.
on Thursday,
Oh, that's the same day you're going.
Friday morning, and we on the way down there because the meeting starts at
Yeah.
noon.
Are you going to that?
I'm talking about it.
Uh huh.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
All right.
I need to go get the signatures for the...
Oh, the signatures for the.
Wanna come back?
Yeah, I have to actually I have to paint first.
Okay, then let's do that.
Yeah. I'm gonna paint my teeth and then I'll be free.
Okay.